I think that for fame specifically, I think we're going to have a challenge that the larger we get. I think whenever we grow from like 10 to 20 to 50, now to 70, the systems and processes we have like break a little bit and we have to tweak and improve them. This episode is sponsored by MailTrap, an email delivery platform designed for product companies. Go for high deliverability, growth-focused features, and industry-best analytics. Get 20% off for all plans with our promo code B2B Entrepreneur. Check the details in the description below.
We're thrilled today to welcome Tom Hunt, the founder and CEO of Fame, a company dedicated to starting and growing podcasts for B2B businesses, a company that I'm super excited to be affiliated with and working with. They help us put out this fine podcast. But Tom has chartered a unique path from management consulting to entrepreneurship, building businesses that blend not only innovative marketing with effective talent management, but under his leadership, Fame has achieved significant success with a fully remote team and has become a leader in the B2B podcasting space. Tom's also a seasoned speaker and author known for his insightful approaches to the future of work, leadership, and remote team dynamics. Join us as we delve into his experiences and learn from his journey in transforming the way businesses engage with their audiences. Tom, welcome. I'm so excited to have you on the show today.
No, I'm absolutely honored to be invited. And I'm super excited because what you guys stand for in this show, and actually your business as well, is very aligned with how I like businesses to be run. So I think it's going to be a great chat.
I can't wait because there's one thing on your LinkedIn profile, Tom, that caught my attention right away, which is I have no idea what I'm doing. That is literally your LinkedIn profile. Why did you choose that, Tom? Just out of pure curiosity.
It's like part truth and honesty and part like what I've learned from like 10 years in marketing is that if you want to get attention cheaper, you just have to be a bit different, and a little bit like cheeky, a little off the wall. And so it's absolutely true. Like I'm like founder CEO of a now 70-person company. I've never done that before. So there's part of my day where I have no idea what I'm doing. But so that's like half of it, which is true.
I think any leader would say that though, right? Like that's true. Like 90% of my day, no idea what's happening. I'm just checking in.
Exactly. And then the other half is just trying to be a bit different because you know that the classic LinkedIn tagline is like thought leader, innovator, exited founder, and so it's just trying to vag a little bit.
All right. So this brings me to my first thing. I've got to relook at my LinkedIn bio. I feel like I got to be a little more honest, Tom. I feel like you've encouraged me to say, which is an interesting piece for me because I think vulnerability is such a important piece. And now I'm like, I probably have something lame on my LinkedIn bio. So now, Tom, I got to go check it out. So you have founded multiple businesses, including Fame, which has been super successful. Tell us, what's your best lesson on leadership that you've picked up along the way?
I think it's quite a fundamental one. And I'm trying to really work a way to like explain this. So this might be a little bit rough around the edges, but it's basically a belief that if you allow people the freedom to do the right thing, that they will do it. And I think this is a hard belief for a leader to have. It's almost like to get better results, you have to release more control and have this belief that people are generally very good and want to do the right thing. And so if you kind of release that control, ensure that you have some guardrails for the people that you work with, obviously, this is very freeing for the organization in that it adds a lot of value to the people, but also can create great results for the business. So slightly nuanced, but that I think is my biggest insight.
Yeah, but that's not an easy insight to arrive to. So you and I were just chatting beforehand and you were saying, gee, Shen, I'm not sure that this trauma-informed, I know what you're really talking about. And I said, Tom, the reason I wanted to have you on, which is totally true, is all trauma-informed means in the work environment is that we're letting people be their full selves, that we realize people have stuff outside of this thing called work, that for many of us, work is just a means to gain money to go do the things that are really important to us. And that's what I've been so inspired about on your LinkedIn post specifically is this idea of like, it is possible to have a team fully remote, that they don't need to call and ask me if they can go to a doctor's appointment. that they can just go and I'll assume you know what your job is and you'll get it done in a reasonable amount of time.
Exactly right. I think the way to sum this up is that you will never win in the battle between somebody's life and their job, unless you work in like investment banking. Like, well, there's like maybe 2 to 5% of contests where the business can win. And that's because the people are like, work is everything for them. But 97% of people, it isn't. How I came to that realization, I think it stems from this belief that I think people generally will do the right thing. And I think I came to that because, especially like younger, I was fortunate enough to be able to travel quite a lot. And, you would hear about places like maybe in the news that supposedly were not great places or the people were not nice, and then you would go there and you actually meet the people and everyone is just like super nice. There isn't a load of crime in Colombia, or not everyone in Russia is like horrible. And so that was the first thing. Then the second thing was actually a book that we can link below. It's a book called Humankind, which is a really interesting book because the author essentially just really digging into the data of whether the world is getting better or not. And actually the world is getting better. And so those 2 data points, I think, change the way I think about working with people.
Yeah, because that's the thing. I hear all the time from leaders like, gosh, Sean, if we actually do it this way, how will we know people actually get their work done? Like if I'm not micromanaging. And I watch with my own staff sometimes where I'm like, listen, you get it done when you get it done. They're like, well, but what's most important? I'm like, I'm sure you can figure out what's most important. Like, this need that we want to be told because the traditional way of how we learn to be at work versus when it's freeing. And what I've watched, and listen, I run a much smaller team than you do, Tom, intentionally. I run a smaller team intentionally, which is sometimes I'll have an idea. My staff will say, oh yeah, we don't have time for that, Shen. We don't have time to do that thing. And I'll be like, okay. And then pretty soon someone has started looking at it, researching it, and has got excited about it. And we're doing the thing, right? Like I didn't say anything. I was just like, yeah, whatever we can get to it. And then I just find that when they can choose what they're excited about, it's usually more successful in the end, whether we're launching a new product or a new download, or we're changing slides for a presentation or whatever it happens to be. That autonomy makes people happier.
I think this was drilled into me quite early on. A book called Drive, Autonomy, Mastery, and Purpose are the 3 things that make people engaged. And so what you explained there is super interesting. There's like the freedom of the how, which I think is easier to achieve. You sit down with the team or the person and you kind of work out where we want to go, and then you let them define how. That's like level 1. But then what you're talking about, which is awesome, is the freedom of the what, or stepping back a little bit from the department and maybe setting the vision, like the how or like the what at a much further level. And then the smaller like steps the team also get to decide, which is like all very, really awesome and very hard to get to. So those are the 2 stages, I think, of freedom that gives the autonomy to the team.
And listen, that's not always easy for me as the leader, right? Like there is a space in there where sometimes I'm like, I just want this thing done. Like I just need this piece accomplished. It'll just make me feel better. But every time I feel that way, and every time my team says, yeah, we're working on these other things, Sean, that you equally said were important, and I'm kind of forced to wait, is also guardrails from my team back to me, right? Like it's a 2-way street for me. And I think that's the piece that I see as a struggle kind of in traditional business settings, is that most of us grew up in a space, and Tom, I know this is the case for you, it was the case for me, that it's one way, it's top down, you just get your instructions, your marching orders from your boss, and off you go. And the biggest part that I see, the biggest challenge is saying there's a new way. It's hard for me, but I also find sometimes it's hard for staff when they're so used to working the other way to get grain, because I work with a lot of freelancers who have a full-time traditional gig and they come freelance for me and they're like, wait, what's going on over here? And I'm just like, yeah, you're just going to get to it when you get to it and let us know what that is. And they're like, well, do you want to give me some more guardrails? Not really. Like, I think we're hiring you because you're an expert in this field, whether that's graphic design, right? Like whatever we've brought you on to do, we want you to bring all of your ideas. And I get yelled at from my staff, like, you need to be clear. I'm like, no, I want to see what you come up with, because saying, I don't know what I'm doing in the LinkedIn bio might be the best idea versus this preconceived notion of trying to copy what everyone's done before us.
Yeah, this is like a completely different way of running a company. I think you highlighted the most important point. If somebody is listening and wants to kind of adopt this more give your team freedom is getting the right people there. Because if you do bring someone in that has worked typically in the top down and doesn't want to be flexible or doesn't want to change, it's going to be very hard. And then you don't want to set yourself up for like, I basically think it places more importance on the people that you bring into your organization. And so this is quite a standard like business piece of advice, but just being like super, super careful about the people that you let in.
That's a key one. So the other thing I'm interested in, Tom, and I think a lot of people are, is that your team's fully remote, my team's fully remote. Now, of course, during 2020, 2021, that was the case for, all businesses across the globe during COVID. And here in the States, especially, we're seeing a lot of businesses, Amazon, all the big ones calling workers back full time, back into the office, seeing a lot of pushback. How has being fully remote for Fame helped you? And at the same time, what are some of the challenges that you're facing as well being fully remote?
The number one benefit is that we get to confine to where our office may be. And so I think without that, I'm not sure if the business may not have worked. Plus, we would have had the office expense. And I feel like we would just not have had the same quality of people. So that's the first upside. I would say the biggest challenge or drawback, I think one of the big upside from having an office is information transfer or learning between team members can be faster in person. And so I think if I had like a 4-person startup and we were trying to solve like an AI challenge and we needed to brainstorm all the time and discuss things, then maybe I would have more in person. But our business is slightly less like small group of people like actively problem solving, and therefore is better adapted to the remote setup. So I'm not here preaching that everyone should be remote. I think every business should have some kind of remote option. Amazon this week are now calling everyone back to the office full time, which I think is like a thinly veiled, like we actually want to do layoffs. And so they're trying to get rid of people by doing that. So I think ideally you can benefit from that flexibility of having people from other geographic regions, but then if needed, have that in-person collaboration. So we do have 2 times per year, the team does get together. And so during that time, team members can knowledge transfer very fast. And also we get to know each other. But aside from that, it's 100% remote, no in-person requirements.
I love it. So I think that's a big one. The first one you talked about the win, is this idea that talent's not confined, right? Like you get to draw from people's abilities all over. And if you were just located in London or just located in Glasgow or just located in New York, you got to find people who want to live in those places. And frankly, all the cities that I just mentioned are really expensive to live in, right? So that's another issue, is then you're paying more, right? Like not just your commercial overhead expense, but you have to pay employees more to live in the spaces so that they can get to the work and get to the office. But that's the piece that I found, is this ability. Listen, as a US B2B company, right? And we work with you all mostly in the UK. Most of your staff is located overseas from us. We've had 0 issues. I think that's the piece that people sometimes need to hear, right? Like, my staff is located all over across the US, multiple time zones. But to your point, because I travel so much in my business, that I make it a point to see my staff when I'm where they are. I have a much smaller staff, but because I travel 150 days a year to be on site with clients, it's like when I'm in a client where one of my staff lives, like we're at least having dinner, if not getting together, if not having a work day together where we're both in the same space. And I just rent space for a day, right? In a remote office space, and we're together and we do it.
Yeah, one thing I will add here is that your ability to collaborate with someone remotely is like significantly increased if you have met them in person at least once. So I think like many remote challenges come from, I think, where there's like one headquarters, let's say in the UK or in the US, and they're working with a team maybe in the Philippines or in India. If the leader from the US or multiple people in the US or UK team just go to the Philippines or to India for like 2 days, then it's likely that most of the problems will be solved. I can't really explain it, but I'm sure you probably experienced that as well.
Yeah, all the time. Nothing beats face-to-face, Tom. I think you would agree that like you can get a lot done, but that's the relationship piece. From the trauma-informed lens, we talk about connections before corrections. Like you got to know people, but connections and relationships can happen in lots of different ways. It's just, are you willing to care more about people than the task? And I think for us, that's been the big learning piece. So Fame has grown significantly. It's definitely one of your great achievements. It's become an amazing company. So how do you foster that collaboration still for folks? Twice per year is still not a lot to be together, and not allow your team to feel isolated. I think that when we talk about the trauma-informed approach, we talk about how isolation is so devastating for individuals. So how do you foster that cohesion among your team members?
Yeah, the first thing I'll say is that we're definitely not perfect at it. It's like a constant improvement. We have something called the Culture Club, which is people inside who are like working on this all the time. What I'll probably do is like just lift out some things that we've either tried or are doing to help with this. The most recent one is essentially like a little budget that you can claim. It's only a small amount, can be claimed to be spent on anything if you meet another Fame team member anywhere in the world in person. And so that can be spent on a co-working space, could be spent on food, drink. I mean, it has to be legal, I guess, or like any kind of activity.
As you're just saying it out loud, you're like, it does have to be legal, team, if you're listening. Just
And so really if you think about what it is, it's like an incentive to meet people in person, which we know will improve collaboration in the long term. So I think that's quite a cool thing. Again, we've probably been running that for like 4 months. So it's kind of hard to measure the impact, but I think we'll probably keep that one. We have the twice a year summer and Christmas party. And actually, to be clear about that, it's kind of split in two. Because we have a large chunk of the team in the Philippines, a large chunk of the team in the UK. And so they are separate. We have not yet flown one of the other team to the other area, maybe in the future. So that's another thing. Next up is we have 2 meetings a week where the majority of the team are there. So on Monday, it's the whole team, or 70. And then on Friday, it's split between those two larger groups. And then people are divided based on the other locations of the world, because about 10% of people are all around the world. The cool thing that we do on Monday is that we have a Slack channel, as probably most people do, where if you ever see anything good that's happening, you call out and give a shout out to our team members. So we run through all of that stuff on the Monday meeting, where I actually call people out that have received those shout outs. So that, I think, helps bring people together, because obviously each example is one team member shouting at another. So that helps with those bonds. And then in the Friday meetings, we do weekly wins. And so every person just says their work-related win from the week, which again, I feel like brings the team together. So these are, I would say, some like initiatives that help with the isolation. The final one, which I think is super important, is often the key like possible like information gathering about somebody's state is through their manager. And so every team member has a manager, obviously a Fame, and then every manager has what we call a monthly chat with the team member, where they run through a rough number of set questions. And that is the point at which the manager would ideally gather information about how the team member is doing. And then that is where we'd be able to put other measures in place if needed to support the team member. So I think that's probably maybe the most effective tool for finding out about isolation and then remedying it.
Well, you also have another unique piece, right? Which is you let some of the team run your LinkedIn channel as well.
So our LinkedIn page.
Yeah.
I think this is something more companies should be doing, in my opinion. I'll quickly explain how we do that. So I think what's great, especially if you're in a service business like us, where the client or a prospective client is likely working directly with somebody in your team, it's like use the page to showcase who the potential client may actually be working with. And so we have a number of people within the team that will completely voluntarily post regularly on LinkedIn. And often what they post about is to do with either podcasts or to do with HR or the stuff that we enjoy as a company. And so then twice per week, we review all the recent posts from all team members, and then we will select 1 or 2 per week to post from the page. We'll slightly edit the post, and we'll ensure the topic is related to what we believe at Fame or related to our service. And it often will include an image of that team member, and then we'll post it from the page. And so that is like, we've kind of proven that post will get engagement because it's been posted by the individual, and we select ones that do well. And then it also showcases that individual both to our internal team, because most of our internal team will see that post, but then also to their external clients. And the great thing is it costs essentially, or it's very low cost, because all you need is somebody to review the post, tweak it slightly, and then post it. I think it's quite a nice LinkedIn page content strategy.
It's another one of those really easy inexpensive ideas, right? That instead of everything being curated from, in this case, the Fame perspective, having employees weigh in on what's happening, what's going on. And from that kind of first person perspective, I think is not only helpful in building the relationships with clients, but again, giving staff ownership of what's actually happening within Fame.
That's a very good point that I hadn't really thought of, but you're totally right. Like the other thing I mentioned before is what we call the culture club, which that was like not mandated. It's kind of like sprung up, and their job is to like do our culture stuff. So that's like one group of people that decided to do that. And then it's kind of rotating, like some people step off and new people will step on. So yeah, I think that's another example of like placing the responsibility of the well-being of or our culture to the team.
Yeah, because it gets us away from this idea. Like, I'm not sure how much in the UK this happens at companies, but here in the States where it's like, the boss decides, oh, we're having a pizza party instead of giving bonuses or a day off or something. And then, there's been kind of a big pushback here in the States about, we don't need I can buy my own pizza. But I think when the staff owns it, to your point, when the staff is deciding what it's going to be, and they have ownership of it. First off, it's things that they want, right? Like it's not just other people saying, here's what we think you want. Just listen to what people tell you they want. And they own it. And it becomes part, again, of that autonomy piece of like, hey, you set a small budget, which, by the way, I think is an important piece I want to reiterate for leaders. It's not just that you have this thing, you've also given it a budget. Because so many times, and this just in the corporate world, we start a subcommittee and we say, hey, give us your recommendations, but we don't give you a budget. We don't give you any authority to actually do the things you discover and find out. So in this case, I think one of the important pieces that you said there was the team has this small budget. It's not huge, but they got a small budget and you just claim it for whatever you want to do. It's a big piece.
Yeah, for sure. I think the incentive has to be there, both because it'll make people do it more, but also to show the team or the company that it's something that we value.
So, Tom, as you're kind of looking forward, we've dealt with a lot of challenges. COVID surely challenged a lot of businesses in a lot of ways. But as you look ahead, what do you see as the future challenge of remote work, especially as it comes to leadership and management?
I think that for Fame specifically, I think we're going to have a challenge the larger we get. I think whenever we grow from like 10 to 20 to 50, now to 70, the systems and processes we have like break a little bit and we have to tweak and improve them. So this is why we're constantly evolving the strategies that we have. So I think that's innate to any company that's considering being remote. If you desire to grow, which is not always a desire, if it is working at 10 to 20 people, is it going to work at 50 or 100? And so that's the consideration. In terms of like general challenges in the world, I think I'll echo my earlier point. Like, I don't think that remote is like the best setup for all kinds of work. It's just for Fame, the type of work that we do, it enables us to be fully remote. Obviously, if there's like hardware and in-person stuff involved like that, obviously you would need to have some kind of in-person like function. But I also think that for some businesses that have like very complex technical problems to solve, or maybe like more unknown things, like the whole startup thing where you're actually building something no one's ever built before, I do think that would need more in-person engagement. So I think it's about like, in the future, if you are the founder of a starting company, you have to understand the type of work that you want your people to do, and then build the culture and the structure around that, as opposed to just being like, okay, remote work is trendy, or we should definitely have an office.
Yeah, but do you think employees are going to want to do that? And that's a legitimate question because, we've now had a generation of kids who spent most of their school time doing remote school. I can't imagine that they're going to want to go to a traditional office space. And I hear you on the collaborating, on the let's build something we've never built before. But I'm still wondering, do you really think they're going to want to do that in a traditional space as they have in the past? I mean, we obviously don't know. We're both guessing a little bit, but just the trending of the world, it seems to me that the technology around remote is going to get better and better around collaboration. And there's going to be less and less people in the same physical space as each other.
I agree that the amount of work that's done in person is going to decrease. But at the same time, It's definitely the binary. I don't think the best setup for any company is fully remote or not. I think there needs to be some balance. And so I think over time, the balance will shift to more remote, but it will never get to completely remote because, as we mentioned, like human connection is this very special thing that can only happen to like maybe 10% of the real thing through video calls.
And as a person who does training, right? Like my job could be completely remote. But what I hear from my clients is no, trainings are one opportunity for us all to be in the same room together, Shen. So like we're going to do it in person, which is the part for me where I'm like, are you sure? I'd love to be remote. I can really do this from Venice. Like I'd rather be somewhere, okay, here we go, right? I get to get on a plane to some regional small location somewhere. But I think you're right. I think there's always going to be a percentage of that in-person place. And I think that is going to be one of the challenges. So just as we're talking about this, Tom, what else is, even if we set aside remote work, just from a leadership challenge, what do you think is the next big challenge for leaders coming down outside of whether we're doing in-person or remote work?
Well, I'm seeing a lot, a challenge that we had inside Fame, and I'm seeing a lot in LinkedIn posts, is the impact that a manager can have on someone's work life. And so my definition of a leader is somebody that manages managers. And so if we are now aware that the biggest factor as to whether somebody is going to enjoy/stay in their job is their manager, then the pressure is on the leader to improve the performance of their managers at this very specific skill that no one's ever taught called management. And so a lot of my recent LinkedIn posts, I literally repeated in the post, train your managers, train your managers, train your managers, because it's called the Peter principle, I believe, where people get promoted to their level of incompetence because they ultimately get pushed into management when they're like an expert podcast editor or coder, you know. And so the short answer to your question is management training, but that's a longer explanation to it.
But the management trainer, and I think, because I read a lot of your posts, Tom, and I think this is where we probably agree, is that it's really about being a people person. It's a separate skill from any hard skill you might have. So your background's in marketing, right? Like got a lot of skill in marketing. I know you have a lot of skill in marketing. But that you don't have to manage any people to be really good at marketing, right? Like in truthfulness, that's not what they teach in marketing school, right? Like we don't talk about the people aspect of it that much. And in management, it's about relationship and making people feel valued and bringing the best out of people. So we got a place we can send all of our leaders on this call. What's the number one tip for building relationship, you think?
Yeah, that's such a good question. My answer is the verb is perspectiving. And what that essentially means is the ability to take someone else's perspective. I think that's the number one thing you have to do in order to manage somebody, because without understanding how they see the world, how they think about something, or how they feel, it's going to be very hard for you to help them on their journey to achieving a goal. Then the next question is, how do you build that skill? I'm not sure what the answer to that is yet, but I should develop an answer to that and add that into our internal management training.
I love it. I love your word perspectiving here. I mean, in my work, we call this the paradigm shift, that the idea of moving from deficit-based to strength-based. So moving from what's wrong with someone to what's strong in someone, right? Like not just seeing people through their weakness. Now, again, it doesn't mean people don't have weaknesses. We're human beings. Everybody has weaknesses. But the way that I see managing happen quite often is that we lead from people's weaknesses instead of leading from their strength. And if we can make that shift, that the weaknesses get better, right? But I also call this introduce me to the person like they're your best friend, which is oftentimes people will complain to me about someone. And because I work in really large systems, right, there's plenty of people to complain about because they're human beings and people aren't always in the best frame of mind doing their best work. And people will go on and gripe. And listen, when I'm listening to what people are saying, it's like, gosh, this sounds like a terrible human being, right? Like, I mean, you've said nothing nice about them. And when I make people stop and pause and say, okay, I've heard everything you've had to say, but now introduce me to this person like they're your best friend. In other words, you know your best friend's weakness, you know your best friend's worst quality, but if they walked in the room, you wouldn't start with that, right? Like you would start with all the amazing things about your best friend. And to me, that's very similar to this prospectiving idea, which is, wait, let's start with strengths And then from that, we can build a relationship to work on weakness.
Yeah, I think when you're pushing somebody to introduce somebody like their best friend is forcing them to change their perspective on that person, which I think is like on the road to being able to take their perspective and will help with the empathy that they have to that person.
I agree. And that's, for me, that's the piece when you say, listen, leaders are managing managers, right? That's what that is. And that relationship is, how do you have more empathy? Because everybody can't give you 500% every day. Like, that's just not sustainable in my mind. And we're people, and listen, I just didn't get a good night's sleep, or I stayed up too late watching the football game, or right? Like, whatever it happens to be, or my spouse is sick, or we had to run to the emergency room, whatever it happens to be, is that we have to give space for that. And if we can begin to see people, to your point, around the world, maybe from their best qualities instead of their worst qualities, right? That it changes things. So I just love this idea of the prospectiving. It's going to be a verb that I've got to get into my vocabulary there. So Tom, as we kind of wrap up today, what's one piece of advice you'd give to new leaders who are kind of navigating the complexities of, I won't even say remote work, of the modern work world, and maybe for the first time, or maybe they've been at it for a long time and they know that the way they've been doing it isn't working and it's just time for a change?
In my favorite management book is called High Output Management by Andy Esgrove, the Intel CEO founder, I think. He outlines the 7 different management activities. And we don't need to go into all of them because I think the most important one is called meddling. And so meddling is when you actually go in and you would either do the thing or tell the person how to do the thing. Now, that initially sounds like it's bad, but actually sometimes meddling is the right choice to make. Let's say we're about to do something wrong that's going to significantly impact the client's business or our own business. Meddling is actually the right option. But you have to understand that when you meddle, you're decreasing the belief or the freedom of your managee. So that's the downside. Now, obviously, when you step back and don't meddle and then the thing goes wrong, but then maybe next time the managee gets it right and they've learned. So that's the upside of not stepping in. And so the direct answer to the question is knowing when to meddle is a crucial management skill that I would kind of try and explain this to, or within our management training at Fame. So if I'm training new manager, here's one of the core points to focus on, I think.
I love that. Knowing when to meddle is a great piece. I struggle with that. I'll just be honest, and so what I've really fallen back on is asking a question to try to meddle from afar, if that makes sense. Instead of just saying, hey, don't do that. It's like, why are you doing that? Like, right? Like this idea of trying to meddle from afar, because man, I'll try to rescue somebody if I can and save them from hurting themselves. But to your point, Tom, sometimes they kind of need to make a mistake in order for it to never happen again. And I've had this happen in my team where it's hard to be like, oof, we might not recover from the loss of that client. And by not recover, I mean, listen, we'll find another client, but we're probably not going to be able to repair that particular relationship. And sometimes I found that that's okay, but that's hard when you're responsible for the bottom line and everybody getting paid sometimes to find that balance. And so for me, the meddling has come with, what's the question I could ask here instead of the statement I could make?
That's a great pre-step to prevent meddling. I can't remember, it's a very famous business person. They had somebody in their team who did something wrong that essentially meant they lost, let's say, $5 million, something big. And then the person who made the loss came to this famous business person and said, are you going to fire me now? And then the famous business person is like, why would I fire you now? I've just paid $5 million to teach you this lesson. And so it's an extreme example, but that's how you should see one of the upsides to not meddling.
Yeah, that's exactly it. All right, Tom. So we live to do some quick fire questions around here because we think relationships are so important. That's how we get to know the real you. And you're so vulnerable anyways on LinkedIn. For anyone who's not following Tom on LinkedIn, you should go over, follow him. There's some great perspectives over there, maybe getting you to stretch, think a little bit. But Tom, tell us, what's the latest book or television show or movie you've watched that's caught your attention? Why is it standing out? What's taking up your time in your media space right now?
So I binged this audiobook. It's a book primarily called The Money Trap by a guy called Alok Sama, who was the CFO at SoftBank. And it's the story of his journey through finance and ultimately being the CFO of Masayoshi Son, who was the founder of SoftBank. And it's just he's a clearly very intelligent, cultured guy. And the way he writes about how Masayoshi Son, this crazy billionaire guy, does stuff like have dinner and stuff was just really eye-opening, but also quite amusing. So I would recommend that book.
Okay. Well, we'll put a link in all the show notes to all these books that we've talked about today, which I guess leads us to, if you could have dinner with any historical or contemporary leader, Tom, who would you choose? But what's the one question you would want to ask them?
I would say it's probably quite a logical answer, but I've always been quite fascinated with Peter Thiel. And one of the reasons is he likes to ask other people he is potentially going to invest in or whatever. He'll say, what is the one thing that you believe that most people disagree with you on? And I would probably, if I'm being very pragmatic and logical here, is I would do that, ask him that question loads of times, and then just invest money as to what he says, because he just gets it right a lot. So that's my pragmatic answer.
Listen, a pragmatic answer. There's place for those every once in a while. So tell us, what's the thing that's filling you with joy? What's the hobby activity that you're consuming or wish you were consuming more that you just lose all track of time with, that's just giving you pure joy?
Yeah, this is such a relevant question for me now, because when I first went into entrepreneurship, I got super obsessed, 8 hours a day for 10 years. And I kind of fell away from the things that used to give me joy before I discovered entrepreneurship. So from when I was 5 to 16, I played football a lot, but then it became uncool when I was 16. And then I actually didn't studied entrepreneurship completely, forgot about it until 2-3 years ago. And now you mentioned maybe if I'm not doing this thing enough, that's my girlfriend would complain, because I play now 4 times a week and then also watch it a lot as well. So it has to be football. And I think it's because it's unlocking this childhood passion that I had, this nostalgia. And it's the one thing where you step onto the pitch and literally there's no space to think about work, and you come off the pitch and you're actually that bad thing that happened is actually not that bad now. So that's the thing.
I love it. Just even watching your face as you talk about it makes me happy and filled with joy, because you're so filled with joy talking about it. But that also means that for our U.S. listeners, you're talking about soccer and not U.S. football.
That is correct, unfortunately.
Which will confuse everybody, which the hint is given on when they start talking about the pitch, everybody. Tom, it's been incredible having you on the show. Can you just tell our listeners the best way to connect with you, with your Fame team, all the ways in which they can find you?
For sure, yeah, Tom Hunt on LinkedIn. I do have a show that actually has shifted more to stuff we talk about today. It used to be marketing, but now I'm doing more culture, HR stuff. It's now entrepreneurship. So we also talk about stuff. So it's called Confessions of a B2B Entrepreneur. And yeah, I just want to say thank you, because it's just great to see other people that clearly understand this quite a lot better than me, sharing the content, but also the work you're doing through the company. So it's just awesome to see.